Hey guys, welcome to tonight's show on the Paranormal Council, where we're going to be discussing residential investigation techniques, maybe some do's, don'ts, pitfalls, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so you're not going to want to miss anything. I'm telling you, we got some good information coming your way. And of course, guys, if you want to know more about all of us, just check out the very first episode or when we had Sean on for spiritual warfare to learn a little bit of our backgrounds. But we're going to dig right into it. We don't want to keep you guys waiting because you guys have been waiting long enough. So I'm excited about tonight's show, man. This is our wheelhouse, really, especially mine, anyways, and Jen's, even Sean, everybody's. I think, and we all have a part to play in this. So, guys, again, we're going to get started. So, residential. We're going to focus tonight mainly on residential. So for those of you watching, if you have a team or if you want to get into this and you want to get into helping people, these are definitely things you're not going to want to miss. Or maybe you have a problem and you want to listen to what we say, and you may want to reach out to us also. But also, what's going to help us? Guys, send this out. Share this, okay? Click like. Engage in the comments. Say something out there in the comments. Say hi if you have questions. We do listen to the chat during the show. All right. Without further ado, guys, let's get going. All right, so I'm excited. So residential investigations. All right, this is a big one, I think, because this is really what it's all about, right? Now, you could be a ghost hunter where you're just a ghost hunter. You go out and it's a hobby and whatever. We can get into that. That's a whole nother subject because you can still mess things up. You can still do things and, yeah. But this is residential. This is special because this is where people's lives are generally being affected by something supernatural. Maybe not just energy, maybe something with intelligence. We're going to get into it. So I'm going to let somebody go first and talk about what is the first things when they get contacted by a client. What's some of the first things that they want to do? What's some of the things as an investigator or somebody that's going to help them? What's some of the things that you want to know right away? What's the first steps?
Sean, you want to go?
Well, yeah, I guess I can. The well, if I'm on the phone with them, I really want to kind of just see what is actually happening from their standpoint. I want to hear them tell me just a brief story. Not tell them, just give me a brief story. And I'm listening for things, and then I'm kind of thinking about, in the back of my mind, I'm listening to what's actually happening. If it's some real things like poltergeist or some things happening, but then it's kind of like if I get there on property, it's kind of like a big funnel. I just ask a lot of questions about their spiritual traditions, where what kind of spirituality they're involved in. Most of the time, and look, I want to kind of define this because I may be different from what your a lot of your guests and people in the paranormal will be doing. If I'm being called, I'm a pastor. If
right. I was just actually going to bring that up. I was going to say, maybe you should let people know when people call you, they're not just seeing like, oh, Sean Carter is a paranormal investigator. No. Okay.
Yeah, they're not wanting me to come in and prove there's a ghost. They know something's there. And it's usually bothersome. I know one case that I dealt with here recently, children was involved and children was interacting with this thing. And it was even scaring a lot of the skeptics because they were also starting to hear some things. So when people call me, I'm asking a lot of general questions, but I want to see what's spiritually going on in that house. If it's someone by themselves, I want to make sure that I'm getting, I have people with me always. I always have somebody with me first and foremost when I go to a location. I don't go by myself. And usually I like to have a female with me in case there's another female there or somebody else shows up. But one of the very first things I want to do is I want to kind of just get the feel of what's happening with their spiritual traditions, their spiritual health. And that's kind of where I'm going. I want to hear what the story's about, what's happening in that house. But that's the first part of it.
So yeah, no, that's That's a good thing. I mean, I'll jump in here too because I don't always go in the middle of everything, but I think for me, it's just I like to gather as much information as I can over the phone first. I really do. I like to gather as much as I can, and probably not as much as I should. To be honest with you, that's the problem. Is like it's always one of those like later you go, oh man, I should have asked about this. I should have asked about that. But you're gonna have more contact with them, and so a lot of times, I personally one of my favorite things, and I actually have one. I have one nearby. Is let me just turn it to a blank page. I don't want to give away any secrets. But like I just carry like I have so many of these. I have like stacks of these. I'm old school. All right. Yes, I do like the cell phone stuff, and taking notes and things on my phone. But I'm much better with the writing, jotting things down when I think about it. I don't want to stop, pull up a memo app or whatever. Blah blah blah. I want to be able to I have stuff nearby. So when I think of stuff, I will write things down, and then that way I can go to clients. I'll start a file on my computer. I'll start a file, and I'll start putting in the stuff that I talked to them about, their name, their info. I have a lot of that stuff wrote down. I'll take notes, and sometimes I'll even have maybe some ideas that I'll put. I try not to be open minded, so I try not to like put too many opinions and things like that. Mostly if I have reminders of like, okay, ask about this, ask more about this, because again, sometimes I forget, or the customer might not be as open on the phone yet, and they
Mhm.
just want to give you some basic information, and they're not willing to open up to the good stuff. That's kind of another thing, and we can dive in deeper. But initially, that's my first steps is just gathering as much information as I can over the phone that the client is willing to share with me.
But before I just jump in real quick, I do have an intake form that I have with about 18 questions on it. No matter what call I take and who's calling me, I usually have 18 questions. And most of the questions are, like you said, about the situation, but it's also asking about the spiritual traditions of the person, what's been going on in the house, if they had other ghost hunters coming in, or if they've had who's been in the house, what's been happening. I'm getting a lot of different information, like you said, and I don't want to give everything out, but I also want to see what's the. I kind of, I know this may sound like duh, but I want to see how much panic there is, how much fear, what's actually within that person as they talk. I'm listening for that. So I'll just kind of throw it over to everybody else because that's pretty much what I do at the very, very beginning.
Yeah, it's almost like a job interview. It's like when I,
Yeah.
I was a manager and I used to have to hire people. Sometimes it's asking open-ended questions and letting them sort of talk, and sometimes it gives you their motivations. And I think for me versus people that come to you versus people that come to me, sometimes have different motivations. When they
Right.
come to you, they're probably legitimately desperate or whatever. When they come to me, they might be like, "Well, he does have a show. He is on YouTube, like, and they want so sometimes attention." Now I know there could be attention in the community with stuff for you too, but there's a higher probability when they come to somebody like me, they're going
Right.
to have that attention in mind. But I know like intake forms are really good. Jen, I know you talked about that before with me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's with my background being primarily a solo residential investigator helper, whatever you want to call it. Um that was very different than doing residentials with a team. And having done it with a team and working with other teams and getting recommendation from other teams, taking cases for other teams, things like that. I've often been sent multiple different intake forms that people use, figuring out what questions that they've asked. A lot of times they'll send in pictures or videos, things like that. But after all these years of doing it, like there's things that I look for that a lot of teams don't. And there's problems that I've seen that come up with teams. Um, I don't know how to say it. A lot of times, residentials are exciting. You can only do so many public investigations. You can only go to so many famous haunted plantations. Like you kind of get a little bored with it, and you're like, well, I've done this for a while now. I should go help people. Not the case. Not the case at all. Please don't. Because it takes a lot of practice, a lot of time, a lot of education, training, working with people who've been doing it for a while. And because there's so many things you can accidentally mess up or make worse. And, especially for paranormal investigators who are outside of work with the church, right? Pastor Sean's is in a different wheelhouse, right? But in my experience, there's been so many times that I've gotten calls from places where they have had 12 teams there just trying to prove if it's haunted. And every one of those teams have given different information, confused them, caused panic, caused fear, made them mistrusting of investigators who are coming in to actually help them, and make their home comfortable and safe again, because they just wanted to record it. They wanted to put it on their episode. I have a friend that they had a family farm, and it was definitely haunted, and they had a team come out finally after arguing with the family and getting all these permissions and stuff. They finally had a team come out, and they came out and investigated. I believe it was for 2 nights. I could be wrong. And they left and never provided them any documentation, no follow-up, completely ghosted them because they got exactly what they wanted and left the family high and dry. Well, good luck getting another person in there to help them now after this has happened to them. And, teams charging to go do this stuff, that's a whole nother ball game. I won't even start on that. If you're charging, stay home. Done.
Yeah.
Conversation over. I don't care if you have travel expenses. If you can't afford it, stay home. Or find a team that's closer that can. I'm very opinionated when it comes to these because I spent so much time doing them and helping people and also cleaning up a lot of messes.
Now, I'm old school. I'll admit, and I'll just say it out loud to anybody. I don't care. Like, we never charged back in the day. We never charged. And I mean, never. And and only until recently I've heard about teams charging people, and that just blows my mind. So I'm against it. I don't do it. If you're gonna help people, do it for helping people. That's what it's about, helping people, not taking their money, and especially when it's something that you can't even 100% prove to them anyways. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, the other thing you have to think about too is you have team members and you have to think about their safety. And a lot of the questions that I see that are not on a lot of intake forms are things like, do you have a psychological diagnosis? Are you on any type of medication for psychological issues?
Yes.
Are you on any supplements for psychological issues?
Good point.
Because, you don't know what situation you're walking into with the living. And you're putting your team members at risk. I was at one last year after spending like days talking to this family, and it was actually sent to me by another team who had already vetted them. And believe it or not, it was a home where child services should have been called. The lady just decided to pull her gun out and wave it around at us while we were there. Said they weren't on any medications, but had 2-gallon Ziploc bags full of prescription medications, multiple all over the house. You couldn't step anywhere without stepping in something nasty, and they had, because of my tactical background, they had on the property, it was like a bigger property. I was out there looking at the property where they claimed all this history was. And they actually had sniper setups, camouflage sniper setups out there. And I was like, it's time to go. Like,
were they snipers or deer blinds?
No. These were tactical.
Tactical deer blinds.
I taught deer hunting for years and years and years, and I'm also tactically trained I'm trained in tracking and anti-tracking and all this other stuff. And no, these were tactically placed not looking for deer. If they were looking in the very wrong direction to be successful. So you have to be mindful of that too, because there are children in these homes. There are special needs children in these homes. There are adults that need help. There are, you know, your team members are at risk as well, and anybody else that's associated with you, because they will, if you don't tell them what they want to hear, they will launch attacks about you on social media. They'll go to your family, they'll call your friends, they don't care. I was just seeing what Andrea wrote. Yeah, Andrea, she's a residential client of mine and now friend years later. But yeah, she had a hard time finding a team to come out that she could trust. And it took a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is like, again, it's a little bit of everything. It's like a lot of times our hearts will open up to the caller, the client, and we feel empathy, and we're like, oh man. And, and probably 90 some percent of the time, everything they say is what they truly believe. But there is that percentage of time when, like if they're not vetted properly, there is that small percentage of people out there that are they're just wackos. They're just nut jobs, bottom line.
There's the other part of it too. Like if you don't have at least a reasonable understanding of psychology, like you could be talking to somebody with 12 personalities. Okay, maybe like 3. But like which one are you talking to? Like you're talking to the sweet little lady who's going to go completely crazy the minute you get in the house. You have to be able to figure out, see signs, know what you're walking into before you even set foot on that property, and I don't see teams taking enough steps to protect themselves, not just spiritually, but physically and mentally and emotionally. And I hear teams talk all the time. I'm done with residentials. I'm tired of being used. I'm tired of this stuff. I'm tired of going out to these places that just want it for the fame or they just want their house to be haunted and start selling tickets. Like I get that. I totally get that. But don't be frustrated at residentials because you're not doing your job.
Actually, you know what? I think we missed a step. I think step 1 is vet your own team first. Start with vetting your own investigators. Start with vetting the paranormal investigators first. Step 1.
Yeah, I won't.
Yep.
I won't. Go ahead, Stacey.
Oh, I was just going to say my process is, different. I'm a Palo Mayombe priest, which is a West African Congolese shaman. It came over during the slave trade and is, part of this, basically the Southern America's culture. That process in doing investigations is actually divination is heavily used. What is known as the Chomalungos. It's coconut shells that are dropped and how they fall depends on whether you're getting, what kind of an answer, to your question. And when someone calls me, the first thing I'm going to do is determine the level of panic, because the profile of the person who comes to me has probably been to somebody like Sean and was rejected or was not helped, or, not saying that Sean would do that, but they've already been to the church and the church was either receptive, not receptive, or didn't do anything to help. They've gone through a lot of other, what are the common avenues of what you would do, paranormal team, different things like that. I'm the last person they're going to call. Jen is also like the last person they're going to call, because that produces results and it's not something that is mercenary. I took a vow when I became a priest that when anybody asked for my help on these things, that I have to help them. That being said, I can't do it for free. I'm also banned from doing it for free. Now, that being said, usually it involves just whatever supplies I would need. Candles, trinkets, whatever. It's maybe $5-10, but I have to take the money. I have to
Small
charge
team.
something for the supplies that I use. Um, my own services, no, I don't do that. It's just I can't spend my money to help someone else with their problem like that. They have to spend the money for whatever it is that I need. Okay, that being done. When they call, I have to ask permission before I even say yes, I'll help you, from my own ancestors. They say yes or no, whether or not I should do it. Almost never do they say no, but it happens. And if it does, I don't even question why, because that means the situation has nothing to do with the spiritual. It's something to do with, crazy. And I would be walking into a dangerous situation. They don't want that. So they say, no, don't do that. Okay, fine. Most of the time it's yes. So I go there, I drop the shells again. Before I talk to them about what's going on, walk through the house, anything, I get a perception of what's going on in the property. What do I feel? What do I smell? What do I taste? All of these things I take in and take note of, drop the shells, ask whether this is, first of all, a haunting, whether it's a malicious haunting, or whether it's like, a spirit of a little kid who's just playing around. He's just having fun, a little trickster. What's going on? Don't say anything to the client because they don't need to know any of that yet. Interview them after I've already dropped the shells to determine whether or not it coincides, those things match. And then afterwards, I will drop the shells again with their questions or their determination of what they think is going on, and see whether that's true. And then figure out what's the remedy should be, because in the end, I'm not there to interrogate them. It doesn't matter who clogged the toilet. It's the toilet is clogged. So my job is to unclog the toilet. So find out whether or not somebody's playing with the Ouija board. There's an open portal, spirits that have been there since they moved in, whatever. We can determine all of that on the fly. And the remedy is what I work out. And my ancestors help me determine what that remedy would be, because some spirits are more powerful than others, or more determined than others, and some things won't work. So you have to, rather than throw spaghetti against the wall, you figure out what the correct formula will be, and then, send them on their way or whatever, and seal the property, ward it off. So,
yeah. And I think, again, that's what's nice about having us here with different approaches and stuff too. I think the process is going to be a little different depending on like who we are, right? If you have a ghost hunting team, it is a little bit of a two-way street, because you have a team a lot of times, if you have a team. And so you're going to go there and you're going to investigate. You're going to try to selfishly gather evidence also, but also for the client, but also for yourself. I mean, a lot of times, a lot of your team is there to learn answers of their own spirituality. They're learning. They're questioning. Does things exist? Does God exist? Does whatever? Like a lot of them have questions, and so a lot of teams are still kind of inward. And then some of us that maybe we started our journeys for our own selves, started to become more of the, oh, we can help people. Oh, cool. And then it becomes that. And that makes it very rewarding to help people and to use your experience. And so it takes on a different meaning. But the process, like I said, whether it's using gadgets, and doing cross validation stuff, which we can get into a little bit, or some different techniques that you guys can talk about that some of you may just go in and be like, hey, look, I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm not using gadgets. I'm going to come in and I'm going to shut the shit down. All right. So like I said, I'll let you guys talk a little bit. I just wanted to talk about the team process part of it again. And I could even go one step further and just say, since I have a show, sometimes it's, both. It's serving both purposes. But anyways,
Well, there was a question in there somewhere. I don't know where it was at. Um,
no,
where we
no
were at.
question. Just me sharing my side of the process. But if you guys want to talk about your sort of process in that, because you were kind of talking a little bit of getting into the process, Stacy, of what you did. So
From
Oh,
my place, go ahead.
no. I was just going to expound, and that's really unnecessary. Go ahead.
No, a lot of my process is completely different than Stacy's, but yet has a lot of similarities in that as I go onto a property, first of all, I'm not really there to prove what's there, what's not there. I'm not researching 20 hours of history on the house. I'm not trying to figure out if it's a ghost or whatever it is. Again, I'm looking at the person and the people there. Now, there has been times to where I think the history of the property actually is probably part of the problem, but it's not always. I have almost found probably not any of the problems been just the property itself. Usually there's a lot more going on with the family unit, and that's what's a lot of the causes in the situation. But again, it could be a ton of things. And so when I say I'm looking at their spirituality, um, and then two, I've been involved with many different programs and YouTube channels. I too have had a lot of requests that, hey, I want to come on, Through the Black and talk about my story. And first thing I do is say, nope, that's not. I don't interview people. That's pretty much my thing. I don't record things to put on a video. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. And a lot of people's like, well, where's your stuff to prove there's a spirit here? Well, you're my proof, and we're here to deal with what's going on. So, I'm not here to get the proof for you. Um, but with that said, another aspect is knowing what's happening by asking questions. Um, there has been times, like Stacy said, his ancestors will say no. There's been times I've been flat told by the Lord, no, you're not going. But Lord, I want to help people. No,
Mhm.
that's not it. Um, and later I've kind of see why. It was either a setup or just something going on. But then when I get there, usually again I feel like the Lord. I don't hear audible voices. I don't, a lot of times though, I'll get there, and before I get there, usually I start getting a sense of what's going on just from the Lord and what I've been praying about. I think prayer for me is a very important aspect of this and my connection with the Lord. And I'll just bring that Christian aspect to it real quick. There's certain demonic entities that's not going to go because of whatever, whatever we say, whatever we do. And some people are shocked. Even Jesus said, this one doesn't hear your rebuke because it's death. It's not going to hear that. And so you have to go and pray to the Lord and he will deal with it. And
Mhm.
so I feel like that's kind of one of the most important things from my standpoint is being prepared myself. And I think we talked about that a few weeks ago, being prepared myself to enter that property. There's been times where I know I'm a man, and so I'm not going to have the right attitude. I'm not in the right frame of mind. There's just something about today. I've even called people say, look, I'm not able to come today simply because I know I'm not in the right place that I need to be.
yeah, yeah, Jen,
Yeah,
you want to add to that?
I mean, I think, Stacy or Sean was absolutely right. And I think Stacy even hit on it a little bit too. Understanding where people come from with their own spirituality has so much to do with it. You know, um, while I was learning a lot of different things, right? There are things like we were talking about connected to the land, connected to history, connected to at the house. There are things that are affecting people in negative ways. When we go there, we're trying to figure out exactly what it is, where it's coming from, and what needs to be done about it, right? And you have to have kind of like a tool belt. And spirituality is a huge part of that because like one of the cases I worked on, there was a family member who had done a lot of black magic and blood magic and conjured things and had an open portal. And I mean, it was just crazy, all the stuff this person had done. And their child was stuck dealing with it, their adult child. Now what do I do? So now this adult child's dealing with their own crisis of faith in their own beliefs, their own Christian beliefs of, wait, they've done all this stuff, and, there's a lot, I'm trying to find the right words because there's a lot of things you can say very wrong.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to a house where I know that they've done this type of craft, I go in armed to dismantle that craft. If I'm going into a house that has a very negative demonic or a very negative entity or possibly demonic, we might be looking at some level of possession. I'm going in with a whole different tool belt, right? And I'm going to have Pastor Sean on speed dial just in case. Or they've been doing some other variation of craft and doing voodoo. I'm calling Stacy. I'm going to have him in my back pocket because there are things you can't know everything about everything, right?
Right.
And even after all these experiences, there are times that I still need help too. And I say this all the time. I don't care how much you know. I don't care how much you've seen. You will always get in over your head at some point, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us know that better than others because it's happened more than once. But I'm just gonna, yeah. And I think it's knowing what you're walking into, knowing how to approach it is half the battle. And their spirituality, and how are you going to fix it, right? If Stacy could go to a property and say, I'm going to throw shells and I'm going to figure this out for you. Everything's good. And they're going, we don't want that, right? They're going to be like, we need Sean. Or there's going to be a Wicca person who doesn't want holy water and doesn't like stones. So we're going with crystals and chakra realignment, right? Like it all depends on their beliefs, because if they don't believe it, especially with somebody who has an attachment of any kind, right? They have to get rid of this. That's what people don't understand. We're not doing necessarily all of the removing. They are an active participant in this as well. Right? Yeah. Especially when you get to possessions and things like that, they have to participate in it to make it work. And so you have to meet them where they are in their spiritual walk, in their lifestyle, but also help them with their situation. And right. I don't see a lot of questions on intake forms about those things, but it's so crucial, so absolutely important. If you want to be successful, if you actually want to change things for these people, if you want to help them, you have to do that,
I'm not afraid to disrupt world paradigms that somebody may hold. Because, like I said, if they're coming to me, they've gone to a lot of other people and not seen any results. And if they're still going to be stubborn that you have to do it my way kind of stuff, we're going to have a talk, because your way doesn't work, clearly. I see this is not out of the ordinary. It's happened to other people too, and this is how we fix it. It's, you're not that special. You really need to, put on your big girl pants, your big boy pants, and, do it this way. And if it doesn't work, then, call me out on it. But until then, this is the way it's going to be. Simply because you've got to be firm with the people, because their attachments, their spiritual influence is fighting against it too, and they're using that person as a combative force to me. So rather than submit to that, I, draw a line in the sand. They either want to help or they don't, and they have to make a decision, and that's part of it. The world paradigm that they're holding is part of the problem.
Right. And I want to get back into something real quick I want to remind people, like, yes, I know I talk about like my show sometimes or whatever, but keep in mind that like only 20% of my entire paranormal career has been just with like that side of it. The other 80% has been residentials. Okay. That's where I started. It's what I do. I help people, and I did that. And only now in recent times have I been going back to my roots. Actually, thanks to Jen, having conversations with Jen, believe it or not, has got me refired back up to want to get back into doing residentials more than just going in, doing ghost hunting again, and getting back into the helping people side of things. So with that being said, though,
Stop blaming her for that. You wanted to do it all yourself too.
right? But going back to those roots, but like, so in investigations, I think it's just like with anything else. You have to take all that data, right? You have to observe. It's so many investigators get focused on because they're imitating the shows, right? And then so they want to go in and they just like, okay, well the meter is doing this, the EMF is doing this, I'm hearing this, and they try to just use the instrumentation, but there's so much more. It's just like we've been talking about. Is the clients themselves, do they have a mental disorder? Do they have maybe that 13-year-old daughter that is going through that rebellion phase, maybe even causing some type of poltergeist activity? It's gathering all these clues, because guess what? That property, like, and I think Sean may have been talking about this earlier, and maybe that's why he was saying, but like, yeah, I think history on a property can play a factor, but in all honesty, residual hauntings or residual activity is not something we get called on typically. Most people kind of like, well, this place is haunted. It's the stuff that's interacting with them, or it's more of the intelligent based type stuff. That's where people start having problems. So yes, you can find sometimes it's mixed. You can have both. Mm-hmm. I've been to properties where, yes, there's some residual activity, but there's also something intelligent there as well. Okay, so that's part of, as an investigator, gathering information. It's not fun, folks. It's not always glamorous, but guess what? You got to, between interviewing, questioning, learning the family, sometimes the dynamic. Sometimes, like, I'll just sit in a house. I remember one case where I just kind of sat there, and then the family started getting into arguments in front of me, and I just sat back and I just let them get into arguments and fights. And next thing you know, like, oh, lo and behold, somebody's having a temper tantrum, and they're throwing things into the wall and causing dents and scratches and like violent outbursts. And sometimes just sitting back, letting families tell on themselves, things like that. So it's just gathering all that information so you can start to try to make a diagnosis and say, okay, what's really going on here? Mm. So with that kind of being said, what do you guys think in a lot of your cases that you have worked, or the stuff you have been involved with? Because again, all of us here has been involved in this stuff for a combined total of many, many decades. So what do you see kind of on average? Like, is it maybe more family dynamic, less paranormal, less possession, less, like what kind of percentages are we talking here in a way? Maybe not exact numbers, but what do you kind of see on average?
Dabbling. People who are, young kids who are dabbling in witchcraft because they read a book that has, the book cover is all hot pink with unicorns and sparklies all over it, and it talks about, how to conduct a seance, or how to do a sour jar or a honey jar, or different spells that you would see on Snapchat or TikTok, and they play with these things because, well, it's female empowerment, and it happens usually around the time that little girls start to uh, change into little women, and that kind of massive shift it draws a lot of energy all into itself. Um, women, I don't know if you know this, but women have a tremendous amount of power in not just reproduction, but in the feminine side. That energy sets off basically what in the spirit world looks like a lighthouse. And, spirits love that. It tells them exactly where to go. And if they're dabbling with things and opening up portals and things of that kind, that's when, ugly things start to, slither in.
Yeah, I think I would agree, back that up 100%. Most of it's dabbling. Um, Someone in the family is involved in some kind of belief system that is impacting the spiritual world around them, and they may not understand what they're actually doing. They're at, they may be in the very beginnings of learning things, but they don't realize the impact of what they're doing is impacting the rest of the world around them. I see a lot of that. I see a lot of people calling out to the ghost, not realizing, they see things on Ghost Hunters, and they start seeing something and they start experiencing things, and they first think, oh, that's cool. And then when it starts into some of the negative stuff, and and some people don't even realize what's negatively happening in their family unit, like that anger and that depression and that fear, a lot of these things, they don't realize it's coming from these kinds of things that could be happening, but yet they keep trying to communicate with this thing, and they don't realize what they're communicating with. And so that's kind of what I see a lot of. A lot of things in their past is coming back into their life and at play. Addictions, oftentimes, in my opinion, I think plays a huge part in this, depending on the drugs. I believe that drugs oftentimes is, I call it a portal, but I think, it is a way into the spiritual world in many different ways. So is alcohol. And so I think those things do play a part. And I help people determine, a lot of my job is helping them determine where, and that's why I talk about the spiritual aspects of what's going on. Also, I want to jump back to something a while ago, because I often hear this. There is so many different parts of pastors and preachers and priests. We're not all the same. I hope you can kind of know that by now. Even in the Catholic Church, not every priest knows how to deal with spirits. But if you go to an average church, especially Baptist church like I'm involved in, they would look at you like you're crazy if you would talk about paranormal, you know. And so I get when people are saying, I got turned away by the church. I get that. I know that. I actually experienced that as a pastor. I've been shunned in associations and stuff because I'm willing to talk about this stuff where other people are not. But there's another aspect to this. I talked to the Christian and none of that stuff worked. Well, let me ask you something. What were they telling you to do? Or was they really getting in depth with what you were doing? Were they really sitting down and dealing with the spiritual side of things? Or were they just throwing water around? I mean, throwing water around is not going to do anything. I don't really care who you are. It's really when you know the authority and what's going on in Christ in that respect, then we're starting to talk about the real deal. If you're just talking to someone who comes in and throws in and maybe puts some oil on some doors and stuff like that, the spirits don't care about anything but that. That ain't going to stop them. But what's going to stop them is when you start dealing with the issues, the root issues in the spiritual side of things. And I know that may rub people a little wrong way, but that's kind of where I'm coming from, and that's what I do as far as my process is dealing with that spiritual side of things, asking questions about, what have they done in their life and what they can do to get rid of that sin or whatever you want to call it in their life, how to get rid of that and how to deal with the baggage that carries. And a lot of people don't want to hear that they have a responsibility in what was happening in their house. And
Right.
but anyway, I'll kind of turn it back over because I don't want to overstep my boundary there.
No, I wanted to just kind of tie in a little bit with Jen and you. Both of you hit on something I think is really important, is that that it's not just a one and done, right? Like you don't just show up. It's not just a one and done, and you want to get to the root of these things. You want to work with people. Like you can't just come in and like they can't have you come in and just, well, clear the ghost for me. Okay. Well, that's like saying, okay, well, here's a car, but like you're never like, they have to put gas in it. There's stuff to do to maintain that car. But anyways, but like it's, so kind of what Jen was saying is like they can't be expected that you're the answer. You have to talk to them and teach them and make them a part of things and like you were saying, Sean, you got to get to the root of the actual cause of all of this. It's more. Yeah, well, and Stacy, all of you guys. I mean, we all say these things. That's what makes us all cool. But no, getting to the root of these problems and fixing. A lot of times. I hate to say it, but for those of us that are like paranormal investigators or ghost hunters, however you want to term us, but we're more than just that. Good investigator. If you're a good investigator, you're gonna work with the family. You usually establish longer term relationships with them. They have access to you. You're working with them. You're giving them things to work on, and it's almost as if you become a little bit of a family counselor sometimes. Or if it's out of your depth, usually, and Jen brought this up for sure, is other people. It's like, hey, I've got Sean, I've got Stacy, I've got other people too in my life that I can kind of reach out to and say, hey, look, this is not my wheelhouse here, but they need some spiritual guidance, or they need this, or they need that, so.
Sean hit on something I didn't want you to gloss over, and he said the word authority. Mm-hmm. That is actually incredibly important because spirits will obviously, come into the house if they're invited by pretty much anyone, but they don't leave until the bouncer with the authority says, get the hell out. When that happens, and when you're using the oils and the waters and the different things, I use a lot of salt. Those are just things. They're just objects. You speaking into it, you enchanting it, or making it holy is the authority. And that is the medium, being the water, the oil, the salt, is just the medium in which it takes place. But the authority is what sticks. And if you don't have the authority or don't believe the things that you're saying, then it's not going to work anyway. That has to happen. And it's not just, you think you're, God's, greatest gift. You have to actually be, given that authority that is given to you. That's in Christianity, they call it grace. In my religion, it's actually called eche. You have to be blessed with that. It's not something that you carry around with you on a normal thing. It is something that is given to you, and you using it for the tool and the reason that it is there, not because you think yourself to be so magnificent. That in of itself, that authority is pretty much key in dealing with any of this stuff, because without it, you're just talking to yourself, talking to your own ego.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you guys are making these great points, and I can maybe just kind of wrap it all up and sum it all up in a little bit of way. And Andrea's going to be over here dying laughing in comments here in a second, because she's going to be like, if she says this to me one more time, right? Because in the mentoring work that I do with people, it doesn't, in Andrea's case, there was craft from family members. There's Christianity involved. There's children involved. There's a lot. There's historical stuff involved on the property. There's a lot. But I will use tools like Stacy's talking about, salt, oils, things like that. I will promote the use of them. However, I always make sure to explain to people that, like, look, you don't need this, right? Like when you go to mass and you light a candle in remembrance of a loved one, or you go to their grave marker and bring them flowers, it's the physical act of doing something, of bringing something, of having something to give that really manifests the emotions, the energy, the feeling inside of you, right? That creates the change. And when it comes to these types of things, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's give them the tool book. Do not, for the love of God, tell somebody who just called you about a haunting to go light some sage. Just stop. Stop. Anyway, sorry. You know, yes, we can give them those tools, help them understand that these are things they can do to improve their situation. But at the end of the day, it comes down to their faith, right? And as they educate themselves, or as you help them become educated and understand things like taking some of Stacy's classes and learning about abilities and understanding and psychology and trauma effects on the family and how important spirituality is and all of it, right? You can actually do all of these things you're talking about without having any of it. You don't need any of that. What you need is yourself and your spirituality, your belief and your faith, and you have the authority, and that's all you need. Intention is everything. Insert Jen's voice. Thank you, Andrea. You know, but the thing is you have to teach people how to become the authority in their own life. So many people don't know how, and how to take ownership of their own spirituality, their own belief, their own faith, their own, you know. And it's funny because for me, I can run in a lot of these circles, but I am a Christian, and I do practice, if you want to call it practicing the craft, because these are just tools, right? That just help kind of set the mood, bring out that inner strength, make you feel more connected in a human way, right? And at the end of the day, it's way bigger than all of us.
Yeah.
And we need that help too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, I would say too that I do want to say for those watching out there, or that may end up watching this on replay too, like, don't think that I'm just here, or maybe some things you heard today, that we're like crapping on paranormal investigation, like maybe shows or ghost hunting. Keep in mind, we're talking about residential investigations. If you want to go and have bad techniques or whatever, or you want to go use your instruments and things like that, and you want to go to Waverly Hills or Penhurst or things like that, fine, go have fun, be a ghost hunter, you know, entertain, do the things. Like, I'll still have some entertaining shows out there. We'll have some fun and we'll do some experiments. We'll use some stuff. We'll use some ghost tech, right? But tonight we've been talking about residentials, okay, like residential investigations. This is where, again, people are usually asking for help. They need help. And this is where, if you are a paranormal investigator watching, then you need to take it more serious. That's what we're trying to really tell you, is like, hey, focus, you know, and if you think it's too much to handle, then don't take it on, because you can screw it up. But you need to pay attention, listen to people, and observe, and gather a lot of intel. Gather a lot of intel, for sure.
Can I just butt in here, and I want to, because I think what she just said is so important, and I want to explain it from my point of view as a Christian, and I don't want to overstep my bounds here. One of the things I do when I go in is find out, again, their spiritual tradition. I actually have a lot of Wiccans call me, and when I get there and talk to them, I'll let them know kind of right off the bat, I'm not really the one you probably need to be talking to, because what I'm going to tell you is a lot of what I deal with from a Christian perspective is not going to work with what you're dealing with, because you're not wanting to deal with it from this point of view, because I'm going to work with you about your spirituality. I'm going to let talk to you about your relationship with the Lord, first and foremost.
Mhm.
Second, I want to have you to stop doing the divinations and stuff like that, and deal with all that from a different plane, okay? And then we're going to deal with, I'm going to teach you, like she said, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to teach the person how they don't have to call me back anymore. And I tell them, look, they're going to keep coming back. These things like to come back and test fences. Just because you cast them out doesn't mean, that's what I think a lot of people don't realize. These things can have free will. They can come back and try to test again. It doesn't mean that they're going to stay away just because you do something. They're going to keep coming back, and you need to know how to deal with that. And so when I deal with different belief systems, I try to let them know right off the bat, I'm probably not the one that you really need to talk to, but I will deal with them and talk to them and help them as best I can. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I've been dancing around it all night, and I'm not really wanting to kind of get into that, but because I do feel like a lot of times when people do come to Christians and, well, this didn't work. Well, if you're trying to mix belief systems with Christianity, it's going to be very difficult. Now, I'm not saying it's not impossible, but when you're really dealing with some of the scriptural aspects of it, yeah, you're going to have some certain parameters you're going to have to walk about. Just like with Stacy and his belief system, there's certain things he's going to be locked into, and there's certain things we're locked into. And so I just want to make that kind of observation.
Oh, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I think that's what makes, when you have a diverse panel like this, too, that helps a lot of people because, again, just like I think one of you brought it up, maybe one of you brought it up about how there's different options for different people. I think, Jen, maybe you said that. That some clients are going to be more comfortable with a more stricter Christian route, or maybe a Wiccan route, or Pamambe, or a TV superstar like me. I'm just kidding. But I don't know. Like there's definitely going to be different options out there, I think, for people. And yeah, maybe some of those options aren't going to work. Realistically, who knows? But I think that I think when you have people that are genuine and you have genuine intent to help, I think that's a huge difference. Because there's a lot of bad choices out there for people, and it's unfortunate. And because yes, there's and this is something I commonly have heard myself, is the amount of times I've gone to people's places and they're like, there's already been a team here, they've already had somebody here, they just made things worse, they left, they never did this, they never did that, blah blah blah, right? The Grammy Award goes to me. Nice. I
need your autograph, by the way.
Yeah, I
need to get a book autographed from you, by the way.
I know. I have one left, I think. I don't know. I ran out of my copies a long time ago. So, but yeah, but no, as I was saying though, there's a lot of options out there, bad options, and I would just tell people for sure, you want to research the people as well. Even if you need help, you really reach out, but also be cautious of who you let in your home. It's okay to ask questions. How long you've been doing this? What is your belief structure? Maybe even references sometimes. Because what you don't want is you don't want to get that new person that's like, well, I just started a team a couple of years ago, and I'm really just trying to help get into people's homes and investigate. I got a YouTube channel where I just, maybe if they do have social media, watch their videos, see if it's the right fit for you, because you might see that they're in there and they might be throwing gummy bears through portals or something. You know what I mean? Like they might be, poking fun of Ouija boards and, things like tempting fate and bad karma. And you may not want that in your home. Okay. So you might want to investigate them as well.
Yeah, I just leave it up to my ancestors to tell me whether or not this is something that I should be involved in. Largely because, human judgment, you can jump to conclusions that, oh yeah, this is perfectly fine. Next thing you know, you're, strapped to a wall and, doing the thing where they're breaking your knees just so you won't leave, a misery kind of environment. So I leave it to the ancestors to tell me whether or not I need to even embark on it. And it's a pretty high standard for them to say no, because most of the time I can help them, and then I'm not in any danger. But there is those moments. So
Yeah, it also helps to have a concealed carry.
yeah, I got that too.
Well, I got a question for y'all on that. There's been times where I have carried, but there's also times where I felt like it was more danger for me to carry it in that situation because I don't know exactly. I would just be very careful. Now, usually with my team, if I take a team in, one of us is carrying usually, but um, with when you're dealing with all kinds of spiritual issues, be very careful.
Yeah. No, actually, I rarely ever do carry in an investigation, believe it or not. I may have it locked or secured away. It just depends. But yeah, like I won't tell you exactly what I do with my weapons, but I don't always I don't just walk in people's homes and I get on them concealed carry. I make jokes.
I got a question for y'all. And just in this, talking about going to residential, when you've got people explaining stuff to you guys, like I don't know all there is to know about different belief systems. I'm intrigued with Stacy's because I've never really dealt with, and I actually have a lot of questions for him off the air since I forgot that he was in that. So, but my question is like. When I had a investigation here a couple of years ago, and the guy kept talking about when he was doing home restoration, he was finding crystals on the 4 points of the corners of the house. There's a lot of paranormal activity here. Um, I'm assuming that some of these things, like the crystals around the house, were used in a way probably to deal with the paranormal that was going on. Is that something that y'all kind of come across of a lot of times, or is that how do y'all handle situations like that?
Well, it's warding is what it's doing. They're trying to create a perimeter fence essentially that is energetic, to where it keeps things out. It's not to create a giant portal or a temple or anything like that. It is, in the South they have a thing called witch bottles, where they'll
Right.
have things put in a bottle and entombed into the walls to keep witches and evil spirits and things like that out, and they'll stay there for hundreds of years in the
Right.
walls until somebody does renovations, and they find these things and they're like, what in the hell is this weirdness, you know and what it is it's creating a perimeter so they don't have to deal with evil spirits or witches or
So
rogueroos or anything like that.
So you would kind of that's the way I kind of took it, that they were somebody before on this property were having issues, and that kind of leads me to that point that there was probably something going on before this person got here. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Well, and there's also been
You
other
take the
times I've
crystals
been to
out and
places. Yeah, I've been to places like that too, where Stacy's exactly right. They're trying to ward things off, right? They're trying to set a boundary. In fact, we've done that in a number of locations. And there's different types of boundaries depending on what you're dealing with. But I've also seen it happen where people who don't know what they're doing will set that up and essentially trap things inside that location.
yeah.
And when they do that and they trap it there, then you got a problem. But it gets worse when they're like, I don't know what's going on here. I didn't think me playing with the Ouija board wrong, or, conjuring these things was going to cause a problem. So now I've put a ward up on the property with an open portal,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Now you got like a reverse problem going on. And those are the houses, honestly, that can get pretty nasty.
It's
As far
just
as
more
paperwork.
context clues, really. I mean, Sean,
Yeah.
it's like when you're in a home and you see people with a huge variety of crystals, it just opens up for more questions for them. It's like, okay, well, do you practice anything? Do you are you Reiki master or something? Like, what is
Yeah.
your, every once in a blue moon, you might get somebody like, I just really like crystals are cool. Yeah, I just think they're cool. Like, okay, well that's fair, right? But you can still even look at like, okay, well, do they have any properties on these crystals that whatever. You can dig a little deeper if you really wanted to. But mostly it's like context clues, and so when you see those things, especially if they are arranged in a fashion where you see certain crystals in certain rooms, are they just trying to protect those rooms and things like that in the corners, and salt, seeing salt across doorways and sometimes things like that. So these are just little clues to question your client more about.
Well, I'll say this, and I could be corrected one day. I can stand corrected, but I have heard over and over and over again, I just like crystals. I think they're pretty. I like rocks. Yeah, there's a reason they're drawn to them. There's a reason why they collect them, and it has to do with their spirituality and or things that they're practicing. Well, and chances are with those crystals, their intentions are 100% good with a lack of knowledge. Because if they're a Reiki master, they're going to be like, I'm a Reiki master. I don't know why I'm having this problem. I shouldn't be having this problem because I'm a Reiki master.
Right.
Right. But anytime you hear, I just like crystals, that's when you really got to start digging.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you think about what we talked about, all of us, the general consensus seemed to be that the majority or at least a heavier percentage of cases are dabbling. And that's really what it all comes down to, whether they were dabbling in crystals, Wiccan, Ouija board stuff, whatever. Like it's all dabbling. It all falls under that umbrella.
Well, let me add one more to that, Josh. I think it's really important. I was going to mention it earlier and we kind of got talking. But it's not just dabbling with different crafts and religious beliefs, but as people want to learn more about intuition and divination and things like that, and they start trying to practice these things, they watch a couple of videos and everything's good, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to try that, and they don't understand what they're doing. They are opening up their abilities. I hate that word, but abilities, right? They're opening themselves up to these new things, and that in and of itself can be the same problem, right? Unless like people are like, I want to learn how to do this, I want to stretch and open up, but they're not first learning how to protect themselves. They don't have enough understanding to be able to control how much they're opening. And 9 times out of 10, that's where people get in trouble. Right there.
Yeah.
So
well, it's just like in Christianity, you have a lot of people who, unfortunately in the church, a lot of people who get saved and they come to the Lord. The church wants to put them up and be the ones talking, but they don't really understand the concepts. They haven't had time to deal with the issues. And I think it goes with like every belief structure out there. It's kind of like when something bad happens, they go to the dumbest Christian they can find on the street and say, hey, what did you see? Well, and it's kind of like a lot of people don't realize that just because you may have studied 15, 20 years, you may not have even got past the first level in some of this stuff. You really need to pay attention. One of the things I tell my team when we're training is I want you to have more seat time in the Christian beliefs than the people that you're talking to. I want you to have more understanding, not for intellectual knowledge, but when somebody asks a question, I want you to be able to answer that question. When you go to somebody and they're asking you, well, what's this shadow person? Well, I can sit down and give you several different things from a Christian perspective, but also I can sit down because I've talked to people like Stacy and you and Josh, and I can sit down and talk to them, get more understanding about what's happening, not just in your, I guess one of the things I would say too, and I tell my team is listen to other belief systems. Don't be narrow-minded in that regard. Listen and learn. You don't have to believe everything they're saying, but listen and learn their traditions, what they're talking about, because that'll later come into play.
Yeah, a lot of traditions are thousands of years old. You have, traditions in Judaism that are, 4,000 years old. Ptolemy is 6,000 years old. Christianity is 2,000 years old.
Right.
Wicca is 80. It came about because of, Gerald Gardner. It's a new thing. So, and he got it from other things too. So understand traditions actually, they've been around for a while because there's a reason for it. It hasn't just existed just to exist. It exists because the traditions themselves have proven themselves over and over again, and that's where the authority comes back. When you do things that have authority, like we were talking before about warding, and I don't know if we said this on air or off air last time you were on, Sean, about the St. Joe bricks. The bricks themselves in Louisiana, there's a brick factory called St. Joe's. It's the only brick factory in the United States that's ever been officially blessed by the Pope, meaning the machines themselves that make the bricks have been blessed. So every brick that is created has been blessed by the Pope, and they're the only ones that are allowed contracts with the Catholic Church to build the walls around their cemeteries, to build the churches, the Catholic churches, because the St. Joe's bricks are individually blessed the same way holy water is blessed. And people will find old cemeteries that get torn down and have these St. Joe's bricks just lying around. People will come by and steal the bricks, not so they can build something with it, but so they can take the bricks home and create the same kind of perimeter we were talking about before with the crystals. They'll crush up the bricks into dust and sprinkle that around their property, or mix it in with cement and create a threshold of brick dust in their doorway to create that ward, because it is a permanent blessing or a permanent ward against evil spirits coming and going.
Yeah, I'm sure the act of stealing holy bricks doesn't diminish them at all.
Well, they tear stuff down, they leave the bricks there. People are like, hey, we could. If you buy them you can buy them on eBay, but they're like $200 a piece on eBay. I got them all over my yard. I keep hitting them with the lawnmower. They come out of the dirt because the house that was next door was made with St. Joe's bricks. They tore down the house, level it out, but they left the bricks in the dirt. So, I got them in my yard now, and I collect them. I got a big pile of them for special purposes. But it's a thing down here.
Yeah. No. So as we get to the back end of the show, I mean, I just wanted to again say to everybody that's been contributing, Andrea and Smokey Rook and Kitty Cat, she made it here, and I don't know if I missed anybody else. I know that's been the main three, and I know other people have been watching. So I appreciate all your guys' comments. If you have any questions, get them in here at the last minute, because again, this has been a really good subject about residential investigations. I always learn from you guys, my peers, no matter how long, just like we said, no matter how long you've been doing this, learning from each other, learning these techniques. Ghost hunting, or I should say, mankind and the spirit world has been intertwined for thousands of years, before written text, because we know in the very first cuneiforms, right, the Babylonian era, right, they talk about it. So we know how far back that mankind has been seeing ghosts and quote unquote demons. So it's an ongoing thing, and so there's a lot out there you can read and learn and be involved in, and I suggest everybody do some reading. Read. I mean, I tell everybody, hey, even if you're not a Christian, you should just read the Bible. Just read it. Read it for yourself. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but there is some really cool stuff in there. Like, I went back and read it later on as an adult. I had gotten away from it myself, and I was like, you know what? I haven't sat down and actually read it from start to finish, in a long time. And I sat down and I did. I was like, I'm going to do it, and I did. And I'm not, as an adult, and especially in the paranormal investigation world, I was like, man, there's like some really cool stuff, especially in the Old Testament when they talk about portals and all this stuff, man. It's like, holy crap, there's some really cool stuff. But then, like, also read some of the other stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a lot of stuff that humanity held important to them that they wanted to talk about, stuff dating back even those times. You know, the Book of Enoch is a great read. You know, the Book of Giants, and you know, even some of the stuff. I always also recommend. You know, there are some apps out there that can help to interpret things a little bit differently as well. And when you're trying to, you know, if you're the type of person that you're not going to go to like a church or a spiritual leader for them to help you because maybe you're a little nervous, there's apps out there that will help you to clarify and explain things a little bit too as well. So I encourage everybody to do a lot more reading and just check it out for yourself.
I've read the Vedas. I've read a lot of esoteric work, and the stuff that I deal with a lot. I deal with a lot of esoteric stuff too, and so reading other material helps you to understand the concepts and ideas that's being presented. I definitely think that's very, very needed.
Yeah, I do it all the time. The Apocrypha, the books of the Apocrypha are fascinating to me. The Book of Enoch, even the Gnostic stuff, like the Book of Thomas, is fascinating stuff to me. And it's more from a historical context or why it's Apocrypha. You can tell when the church, the early church, split off, why they did what they did, you know, going from the Gnostics to what became the Holy Roman Empire. There was reasons for why Rome chose the Orthodox version as opposed to the Gnostics. Even though the Gnostics were technically the first Christians that they talked about in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were not the ones that actually succeeded in, you know, taking over the world. There was the Holy Roman Empire, which was a little bit different, a little bit of authority, a little bit of different take on stuff, and that's just historically for me, you know, very fascinating. You know,
I've actually taught a couple Bible studies with the Book of Enoch, and it was very interesting because a lot of church people don't realize it's not canonical. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can, you know, First Peter uses it, Jude uses it, you know, a lot of different books of the Bible use the kind of the first Enoch, not the second or the third, but yeah, it's very interesting. So
yeah, the story of the fallen angels is amazing in it. You know, the story, it really helps to tie in like Genesis and things like that with the story of the fallen angels, you know, and it even talks about how the angels brought forbidden knowledge down and things like witchcraft, like spellcraft and stuff like that, and taught these things, beautification of eyelids and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty crazy, like the amount of, and even God said in there, like, that's not even like the angels thought they had a ton of knowledge. No, they didn't even have a smidgen of what the actual total knowledge of the universe is. Like it's just a smidgen. Like, so it's just funny. Like, but it's good read. It's just good stuff to learn. Again, and I think when you also one thing I want to point out too is when you start reading a lot of these things, you'll actually see where some of these things do kind of intersect each other and it makes sense. It's like, holy crap, you know, like that's pretty crazy, you know, stuff like that. So it's it can help fill in some holes, fill in some gaps.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, guys. So we will probably start to wrap it up on the residential stuff. But we'll probably get into this more. Maybe we'll get into some more stuff about overall paranormal stuff. But we have a lot of subjects that we're going to be getting into as well. That's going to be a little bit more deeper into some of the energy side or spiritual side of things. So stay tuned for those, guys. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you to everybody that's been here in the chat and that's been watching us. And for those of you that watch us on replay, if you like what you see, again, share it out, or at least click like for us, you know, because that helps the algorithm. And this is going to keep spreading. And because we want to be a solid voice for people, right? We're not saying that we're the authority and we're the best. I like to say that because I just like to be arrogant. It's fun. So I'll say like we're the best. But guys, we want good information out there, and we know that this show predominantly is good information. So we want to get that in the hands of people versus maybe some of the other podcasts out there that are being a little ignorant. I hate to say that. So guys, if you can share, let's get the word out there so we can get better information out to people. And if you or anybody are having any paranormal issues, please feel free to reach out. And usually you can find our information or on my social media with TEPS and stuff like that, Soulfire Paranormal. Usually you can find our information and ways to get a hold of us. And of course, we have access to all these wonderful people here on the panel. So, all right, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next Thursday.
Peace.